All right, today I'm going to key in on these specific areas when it comes to creating a podcast, your equipment that you can use to record it, the environment that you're in, speaking real quickly, just to highlight on some tips when it comes to speaking, recording equipment, editing, this is really important, and exporting and uploading to whatever platform it is you're using. I'll put the time codes below so that way you can skip around if you need to. All right, first, let's look at equipment real quickly. So a couple highlights here are, yes, you can record into the microphone on your computer or even your phone technically, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should. It generally does sound terrible. I'm going to play a little clip here and you'll see the difference. My voice will be recorded onto a USB mic plugged into the laptop, and the person that I'm co-hosting with, he's using his microphone on his computer.
You were that certain kind of like you had your preferences and that was it. Did you guys have that?
Yeah, I mean, ours, well, my Friday night, yeah, so my parents were never home on a Friday night. So you notice the difference there. Yeah, the room environment makes a difference as well. We'll get into that a little bit, but primarily it's going to be that microphone. The ideal situation you're going to want is an XLR mic that plugs into a mixer. This is really what those high-end professional podcasters or radio show hosts use. This can get quite expensive because, of course, higher quality equals higher cost. I'm using an XLR mic right now plugged into a mixer. It's an AKG mic and it's plugged into the Scarlett, but you don't necessarily need to use this. You can also use a simple USB microphone that plugs into the laptop. I'm going to play you a clip with the same person that I was speaking with previously after he purchased a reasonably inexpensive, I think he spent like $30 on it, USB microphone.
Old school, like what you were saying, 60s style Justice League on it.
So you do notice that difference there in regards to the quality. Something else you want to try to use is a pop filter that you can put in front of the microphone. This will help with those sounds. Headphones come in handy, especially if you are using the XLR and mixer setup. You can plug the headphones right into that, and it allows you to hear and modulate your own voice. It also has another bonus in regards to sometimes if you're playing the audio through the speaker, you might get feedback onto the microphone, so it will cut that out. Have a microphone stand that will help you raise it to the level of your mouth. And a headset, what I mean by this is not just headphones, but you can just simply get a headset that has a microphone that wraps around. Quality on that one's not going to be super as well. Here's a quick example of that to give you an idea.
This is never going to age. 30 years from now, it's going to be just like this.
All right, next we're going to look at the environment. This is really important. The location I'm in right now is a separate room of the house. It has carpeted floors, but there's nothing on the walls. They're hard walls. There is a large curtain covering the window, but I actually have the curtain open. It is a large window, so there might be noise coming in from outside, such as airplanes flying overhead or traffic noises, that kind of stuff. So if you do have windows, try to put thick curtains and close them. Ideally, what you want is a nice professional podcasting studio, but of course that can get expensive, and you can do something reasonably close to that at home if you have the space for it. Closed doors and windows. I have my doors and my windows closed in this room so that way nobody can disturb me and that there's no noise coming in from the hallway or anything like that. Turn off any machines that might make noise. My laptop sits pretty close to my microphone. What would be better is if I moved it farther away because you can pick up the fan noise on occasion. Keep your pets and children out of there. I know it's cute, being like, oh, my kid just asked me some silly question, or the cat just jumped up and is in front of the screen kind of thing, but it's distracting and it's not as cute necessarily to your audience as you think it is. If you can, put like soft material up, such as blankets and carpeting. I mentioned I have carpeting in this room. Something that I could do would be to like hang some blankets against the walls to kind of reduce the sound. You can also use sound panels. So those are those foam panels. These are what you see in a professional podcasting studio. You can attach them to the wall. It might be an issue if you're renting. A tip is to record in a closet because you've got all that clothing in there. It's a small space and the clothing is around there. One of the podcasts I listen to, which is Real Friends, Fake Doctors, And Donald Faison, for quite a while, I don't know if he still does it, but was recording his end of the podcast in his closet. It kept his family away from him. It put him in a small space. And of course, it had that nice sound dampening to it. Turn off any notifications on devices you have. For example, the phone that's probably sitting next to you. That way it doesn't ring, especially if you're interviewing somebody or have a guest on your podcast. It's quite rude to have that interruption. And of course, let anyone else in the house know that that's what you're doing so that they won't disturb you. In my house, we know that if the door is shut, don't bother whoever's in the office. So I'm going to real quickly talk about speaking because I think this might be an entirely separate thing to do. But a couple tips here is when you're in a conversation, we have a tendency to be active listeners. We've been trained to do this. You say, yes, okay, that's nice. To let the person know that speaking, that you're actually listening. However, you don't want to do that in a podcast. If it's video, you just nod, that kind of stuff. Because what's going to happen here is when you get into the edit aspect of it, that will be distracting or it'll overlap the person who's speaking and you might need to then bring that down. So stay quiet when it's not your turn to speak. Let the other person talk. This is another one of those things that'll make your life easier when doing the edit because then the editor kind of has to decide, well, who is the priority speaker here and keep their volume up and lower the other one. It can be distracting sometimes when listening to a podcast and multiple people are speaking over each other. Also, depending on what you're using to record, I know Zoom kind of has a problem with this sometimes, that it might cut people out. So if one person's talking, it has their level high, another person starts talking, it's thinking, okay, I need to bring this new person up and bring the other person back down. Some programs might be like that. Again, so just wait for the person to finish saying what they're going to say and then say what you have to say. Plus, it's polite. Podcast recording. Okay, so we've got a lot of platforms out there. Zoom, I know, is super popular. That's usually what I record my podcast with. I've also used Zencaster in the past. Your hosting platform, some hosting platforms actually allow you to record as well. I know Anchor allows you to do it with the app on the phone. I don't think I'd recommend that, but it is possible to do it. Do separate tracks. You really want to use separate tracks for each person. So most things by default are going to put everybody's audio on the same track, which is nice, but it also means you can't really raise and lower one person's volume versus the other. So this makes it much easier. I'm going to show you real quickly what I mean here with Zoom. So I've pulled up the Zoom app on my computer. So you can't do it through the web. You need to actually go to the Zoom app and log into it. When you're here on the right under settings, go down to recording. By default, it's set like this. So it doesn't actually record the audio on separate files. It actually puts them onto one single file. So you want to make sure that's checked. And what's going to happen when you are done with your recording, like this one, the audio, that's what you would normally get. That's everybody on one track. But now I have this. I have myself on one and the other person on the other. So when I do the edit, it's going to make my life so much easier. Recording remotely, it's really important to have a strong connection. If your bandwidth is low, it will lag. I'm sure we've all been on Zoom calls where one person freezes up suddenly. That is annoying. And especially if something's is being said that's really interesting, and then you have to be like, hey, can you say that again? It loses that spontaneity. If you can afford it and it's available in your area, upgrade the quality of your internet connection. Plug directly into your router. Sometimes if you're plugged cable wired into the router instead of using the Wi-Fi, that will actually help keep that connection a little bit better. Close any applications that are connected to the web on your computer. Browsers oddly actually take up a lot of your Wi-Fi connection and bandwidth. Programs that might be running and are connecting to the internet as well. And with your guests as well, try to instruct them to have a strong connection. I've had people that have called into my podcast on their phone from an area with a bad connection. It cuts out a lot. Here's an example of what can happen if you don't have a good connection.
Rubber effects came up, and then so then did computer effects, post-production.
So there you go. Microphone, I've already mentioned this. Use a separate microphone instead of the one on your computer. Pop filters, so we'll just skip all of that. Headphones, again, I've already mentioned this. Wear headphones. that helps. And here's an important one: back up your recording. Not just back up the saved file, but what I'm really talking about here is the recording itself. So one thing that I like to do and has saved me in the past has been to plug into a separate audio recorder. It does require a bit of wiring. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that at some point in time. It is helpful to have a separate backed up recorder. You can also, there are programs that will do this on your computer. So have yourself just recording onto that separate recorder on your computer, as well as whatever platform you're using, and have your guests do the same thing. And then also what you want to do is, as soon as that's done, save it in 2 locations. So in my case, I have one saved to my hard drive and then one saved to an external hard drive. So that way, if somehow one fails, you've still got the backup and you don't have to reach out to your guest and be like, hey, I had a problem. Can we re-record this? I've had to do that. It makes you sound like a jackass. All right, editing. So here we can go into a little bit of editing. I've got a couple videos on this channel in regards to editing a podcast in Premiere Pro, as well as DaVinci Resolve. You can use Audition, that kind of stuff. The main thing is you want to try to edit them on separate tracks if possible. Once again, it makes your life easier. I'll throw the links below so you can check those out as well. Audacity is a nice one. It's a free program, and it's real basic. It's generally what I recommend to people when they contact me saying, hey, I want to do a podcast. What do you recommend? I recommend Audacity. Some effects you want to apply: de-reverb, that gets rid of some of that room level, speech volume leveling. We all kind of record at different levels, so that will kind of help level that out. Max peaks, again, I get into those a bit in the videos that I've mentioned, which I will link to below. You want to clean up any background noise, and I'll show you a quick way to do this in Audition. So I'm in Audition, and I've pulled up a old one that I did, and notice here, if I hit play, you can't really hear it, but you can see what's going on there. We've got all this background noise picking up. So I'm just going to grab a sample of it. I'm going to go up to Effects, Noise Reduction, Capture Noise Print. So it's capturing that sound. Other programs have similar functionality as well. Some do, not all. And then I'm going to go back to that noise reduction process. And what it's going to do is it's going to reduce that particular noise. It's listening for that and going to drop it back down. And I'm doing it to the whole audio file of this person. And notice what happened there. You see how nice and flat it is now? It's not going to be perfect, but it's certainly going to be better. Remove filler words. This is those ums, uhs, that kind of stuff that we tend to do when we're talking, especially we don't like silence as people, and we tend to fill that silence with filler words. Occasionally remove those. You don't need to remove all of them, but I do think it's nice to remove some of them, and it helps speed up the podcast a little bit. Decrease breath sounds if you can. Gets kind of annoying after a while. Remove unnecessary pauses. So this can be when somebody's thinking or there's a pause between the conversation. Kind of remove it. Somebody's listening to this, so you definitely want to keep them engaged. Cut unnecessary dialogue. This is my biggest, number one complaint about podcasts nowadays, is how long they are. Podcasts will go for hours, and I know you think you're interesting. You might be interesting, but you're not that interesting. All right? So listen to it and basically say, is this relevant to the subject matter of this podcast? Is this interesting? Is the audience going to get some use out of this? If the answer is no to any of those questions, cut it out. All right, now when you're going to export it, you want to export it as the highest quality possible. Be sure to use stereo sound. If you're using an XLR mic, this is really important because it is a mono microphone, so you need to make sure that that gets converted to stereo properly. I've done a few YouTube videos on this channel where I forget to make sure that that's set correctly, and you'll notice it because when you play it back, you'll hear it from one speaker and not the other. If you're doing a video podcast, highest quality video possible, of course, and then upload the files to your platform. Here, I'll just jump into mine real quick. So I'm on Anchor here. click to upload and grab the files that you want to upload and start uploading them. It's going to be the same with whatever podcast platform you're using. Notice again, we've got this record, capture audio right from your browser. Because you can do something, it doesn't necessarily mean you should do something. So I would question how good this works. I don't know. Feel free to leave a comment if you do use the built-in recording offers of your hosting platform. Personally, I've always just been too concerned about quality to even try this out to see how well it works. But maybe it works great. I don't know. All right, I've uploaded my audio file, saved the episode. I'm going to enter my title, any description. I'm going to schedule for when I want it to publish. Usually I like to do mine a bit in advance. Season, episode number, that kind of stuff. And then once it's all ready to go, schedule episode and you are good. Platforms generally will also submit it to all of the podcast players, such as Spotify in this case, Apple Podcast, whatever, iHeartRadio. That's in your setup process. When you set the podcast up, that would have already been set by this point. So hopefully this was helpful in just a high level of each of those items. I do have other podcast related content on this channel that tends to go into a bit more detail, and I will be doing stuff in the future that also goes into more detail on some of these specific items, but I wanted to do something kind of high level that you can kind of jump through that will help you go from point A to point B in regards to the recording and the uploading aspect, and not necessarily the finding guests or, choosing a hosting platform, that kind of stuff. As I say, pretty much the end of any video I do for this YouTube channel. Hope you found that useful, and have a good day.